is that the sun has phases, and the solar energies, how the solar energies are working, where the sun is positioned, and how the planet is positioned at any given moment drastically influence the world, drastically influence the experience of animals, drastically influences plants. Humans are very self-centered creatures. They believe that their long-term patterns in society are generated and created by themselves. But the reality is that various petite soleils, like solar flares, various lower solar flares, actually create a long-term, and when I say long-term, anywhere between 5 to 50 years of a pattern that can be tracked and noted in science as to how those solar flares have hit the Earth. I'll give you an example. So for example, and before I give you the example, I want to backtrack because I don't want to sound too cray-cray. But what I'm saying is really important if you can grasp it. Basically, you think that what happens in society has to do with the people in the society. Much of the big patterns that exist anywhere between 5 and 50 years actually get inspired inside of people because of the relationship between the sun and the earth. So our work, we have science, right? But our work was generated and created by brilliant human beings, people who were scientists of their day and age, people who observed, who didn't have written knowledge. And so what they had to rely on was the connection between their being, the shaman is what I'm talking about, of their being with the natural world. Observing the natural world throughout time takes a lot of time. So it's easier to communicate with the mysteries, with the mysterios, with the energy sources that emanate from any living source. In this conversation, we're talking about the sun. So for example, Zealotism, like when cults get generated worldwide, meaning when there's more religions birthed, more cults birthed, and more Zealotism, which is when people go crazy and they actually literally believe that their God is better than that other God. What gets created from cults and religions and Zealotism is war. War gets created. What gets created from war? When you have warring tribes or warring countries, what gets generated is disease. Disease gets generated because there's a lot of dead bodies. When there's a lot of dead bodies and there's a lot of disease, what then comes is a pandemic or a pathogen. So you can actually trace every single pandemic or pathogen to a war. Those wars can be traced to a time frame when people began to believe that their God was better than another God, and there's this huge worldwide sprouting of many cults all at the same time. What they've discovered throughout every culture in all of time, and really there's been a lot of research on this, is that drought makes humans become religious and cultish. It's drought. What causes the drought? And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because when you don't have your food sources anymore, you believe that those food sources are coming from God or from your particular God, those food sources, when dwindling, literally make people go crazy. They make people literally have to war in order to get food. But prior to that, the Zealotism comes. So they can link it to drought. that drought always is linked to a solar flare. So a solar flare ends up throughout all of this history generating and manifesting hundreds of years later sometimes, or like 50 years later sometimes, these pathogens. These energies, and that's just one example, these energies, they influence us, they move through us, they cause feelings, they cause emotions, and they cause psychic and ethereal experiences. We think of them as us. We think of them as our own personality, and we might even, if we're smart and educated people, we might go to work on trying to, quote unquote, open our mind and work through the emotions, or we might react on the emotions. But the truth is that many of these emotions, many of these experiences, and many of the things that people feel are not personal and have nothing to do with your cuadro and have nothing to do with your soul, with who you really are. They're energetic influences that are just pulsing upon us like radiation onto the earth. Radiation has a certain way that the human body and also animals react to high levels of radiation. And then again, there's an outcome to this. There's also certain influences that manifest whole generations of intelligence. Like, I think they call it I don't remember what they call it, but there's an era of time when there was more colleges and more thinking going on and more universities opening up all over the world. There's certain things that move in the water. What is the water moved by? Our luna, la luna, the moon. So we have these solar energies which manifest and destroy, and then we have these lunar energies which are constantly influencing us on a day-to-day and hour-to-hour level. So working with understanding how the moon cycles are rolling gives a human access to seeing that the emotions or the experiencing are just little tides of energy that are coming from the balance of our solar system, and they're not necessarily personal. If you can apply that to your spiritual work and you can apply that to your day-to-day life, a lot of the things that you think of as problems to be resolved, you can kind of set back and be the observer of the energy flow and just let it flow through you, and yet continue to create a relationship of a deeper energy source. That deeper energy source is the current that runs through, that we're blessed with by the Great Spirit. We're blessed with this image of the moon and the sun and the earth.